Welcome to the first day of the challenge. Today you will be learning the difference between multi-page web applications and single-page web applications which we can develop using Angular. You will also learn about Angular components, and we will cover the programming language that Angular is using, which is called TypeScript. So you will get a brief introduction into TypeScript today. As you already know, during that challenge we will cover Angular, then we will cover ASP.NET Core Advanced, and then we will combine both together to create a complete application. So for today there is some theory which is really important because we are doing some computer science here, right? And computer science is based on really sometimes more or less complex technology. So for example, before we start using real Angular, we should talk about what Angular in detail is and why it is getting used, right? So that you really get some in-depth knowledge. Let's start with discovering multi-page applications, MPA. MPAs are applications that download an entire web page as the user needs to see it. So here on the left side you can see the web server, which is hosting an application, for example. And on the right side you can see the client browser. So as the client browses through a website, he wants to see a specific page. That request gets sent to the web server, and the web server then returns that page, which needs to get downloaded by the user's browser. So whenever a user wants to see a page, he sends a request to the server. The server then puts the data the user needs to a web page and renders it as an HTML, including CSS and JavaScript, to make it interpretable by the browser. Afterwards, the server returns the rendered page to the browser of the client. Now the browser unloads the currently loaded page, so the existing one, and loads the currently new and fresh received one to display to the user. So a simple page navigation in an MPA requires that the user needs to wait for such a cycle to get finished. And that happens whenever the user clicks on a single link. While this can be useful for websites with a relatively small number of web pages, it's not always good to make users wait for a postback with each click, especially when the application requires a lot of user interactions. So you might know that from other applications around the web. You click on something, you have to wait, and afterwards you make another click directly. For example, you want to edit something or you want to add something, and it just takes some seconds, right? And that sums up to a minute or 2 minutes, and you haven't really done much, but just waiting every time like 5 or 10 seconds is absolutely annoying if you really want to perform some actions. It's not really that important when you just go to an article site and it loads once and then you can read for like half an hour. But if you have to do a lot of clicks and a lot of page switching in your application or in an application, then the user needs to wait a lot. Now let's talk about how we can solve that issue. How can we minimize the time a user needs to wait during his interactions with a web application? The solution is pretty simple. We need to minimize the amount of data that needs to move over the network while the user is interacting with the application. So we can build more responsive apps using the SPA single page application technology. That enables developers to minimize the data transmission across the network during the time the user interacts with the software. So to sum it up, this is what you will learn in that challenge. You will learn how to create a single page application using Angular, how to develop and connect a RESTful API using ASP.NET Core Web API, and you will also learn how to make use of Entity Framework Core to store and access data, and some best practices by using the clean architecture software design pattern. So that besides of keeping your users happy, you can also make the job of maintaining the software more exciting for yourself and for your teammates. Great, so now you know what an MPA is and why we instead want to develop a single page application using Angular. Now let's move on to the next video and explore Angular and single page applications even further.